Convenes, and welcome to episode 26 of Discovering Steven Universe. Today the episode I'm talking about is House Guest. And let me just say, I know some people requested a reaction for this episode, and to be completely honest, I actually forgot to do that before actually watching the episode and writing down the notes and everything. But in hindsight, I'm actually kind of glad I didn't really bother, because while I'll get into my actual thoughts on the episode coming up, it wasn't really anything reaction worthy, shall we say. So for anyone that did request a reaction to this episode, I'm sorry, but even if I had actually recorded it, probably wouldn't have ended up actually using it, because again, I didn't really feel this was a very reaction worthy episode, at least in my opinion. So again, apologies there. Apologies there. I don't know what kind of accent I just slipped into, but let's get into my favorite parts about this episode. Yeah, I'm not going to give my overall thoughts quite yet. I'm kind of mixing up the formula again for some reason. But yes, my favorite parts of this episode, starting with the fact that Pearl points out that the water gems, or like the water clones as I called them, she refers to them as water constructs, which I don't know if such a thing will occur again in the future with Steven Universe, but if it does, I will try to remember to use that name, because it seems more canonical, I suppose, since Pearl herself calls them that, which it could have just been an offhand comment, you know, using language that she's more familiar with. But yeah, water constructs. I like that terminology, shall we say. But moving on to my next favorite part of this episode, it's actually the track of the episode, which is the father and son song between Steven and Greg, Dear Old Dad. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not the best song that we've had on the show by far. But overall, it's a really good song, and it gives some good background for Steven and his dad. It actually helped me realize that one of the annoyances I did have with this episode, which I'll touch on, is actually not really so much an annoyance for me once I realized the full context of what was happening there. So yeah, just the song Dear Old Dad, the way it sets the stage for this episode overall, it really worked for me. Moving on, my next favorite part of this episode was when Greg gets caught, which part of me almost kind of assumed that he wasn't being entirely truthful. And I even feel like Garnet questioned it, because when Steven goes to heal Greg's leg, but then Greg still isn't able to get up, Garnet seemed... I can't tell if she didn't believe Greg, or if she was just surprised by the fact that seemingly Steven's powers, which had always worked before, had no real effect, or didn't seem like they had any real effect. So yeah, the fact that he gets caught there, I just thought that was admittedly a really funny scene. The fact that it took Greg a minute to kind of catch on to the fact that Steven had actually just caught him was funny. It was a bit of pretty, just kind of classic, silly cartoon humor for me. But then the fact that after that, I mean, Steven is very disappointed in his dad at that point for obvious, justifiable reasons. But then Greg steps up and he actually goes to try and fix part of what he had caused, which he didn't cause the geode to crack, obviously, but he had seemingly caused Steven to lose faith in his abilities, to some degree, which I'll actually touch on again, coming up. But yeah, moving on from there, my fourth favorite part of this episode was seemingly Pearl's mechanical prowess when it comes to Earthling technology, or at least as far as a motorized vehicle goes. And obviously it's a cartoon, but just the way that they had it done to where she was not only able to fix Greg's van, but she made it better than new, seemingly, based on what Greg was saying. So yeah, just the fact that Pearl, despite the crystal gems not having a lot of love for human technology exactly, or just being sort of indifferent to it, the fact that she became so knowledgeable about it, or at least while fixing it became so knowledgeable about the inner workings of this machine, I just thought was really impressive. And then also it leads me to actually wonder what her role might have been, perhaps back when Rose was still around, because I don't know, other than being a warrior, we know that she's not the strongest of the crystal gems. Maybe she played more of a technical role, shall we say? Like she was in charge of maybe fixing some of their technology, something along those lines. I don't know, that's just kind of complete speculation on my part. And maybe that should have been a theory, actually, but I didn't think of it until literally just now. But yes, so that's my fourth favorite part of this episode. My fifth and final favorite part is Pearl's reaction to Greg's hug. And I find it really weird. Like, the crystal gems, other than Amethyst. Amethyst really doesn't seem all that uncomfortable being around Greg. At least not that much. But Pearl seems especially bothered by Greg's presence. Or maybe, I don't know if it's to a point just Earthlings in general, but after he hugs her, she just takes on this disgusted look on her face. And again, I don't know whether that is implied more toward Greg or just, to repeat myself again, a kind of general distaste with human affection, at least from anyone other than Steven. So yeah, I don't know, but it definitely was a funny moment, and the final of my favorite moments, or favorite parts from this episode. But moving on, time to get into my annoyances, or what would have been annoyances until it became just one annoyance. So the original annoyance I had, which kind of sort of stands up to a degree, is the fact that Greg gets really annoying in this episode. It just and he keeps playing it up, him being hurt, even though we find out he isn't actually, and then the constant calling back with the warp whistle. He got really annoying, but I actually no longer count that annoyance, because I feel like that was part of the plot. Like, he was supposed to get annoying because he starts annoying Steven, even though Steven kind of brushes it off until he finds out that his dad had been faking the whole time. It's clearly annoying the crystal gems as well, because Steven's supposed to be trying to help, but they constantly keep getting interrupted by Greg's whistle, among other things. And yeah, just in the end, it felt truly justified, especially when when I think about what they were saying in the song Dear Old Dad. And it establishes, that they don't get to spend each time together. And they don't really get to spend much time together, and talking about how there's no one else like you. I think that was actually a straight part of the lyrics from the song, but it's clear just how much Greg misses Steven, which hadn't really been portrayed before in any of the other episodes. I mean, again, we get the idea that Greg isn't around all the time, or maybe even much, because he's running the car wash. But this is the episode where we really realize just sort of the extent that Greg is willing to go to in order to spend more time with Steven. Going so far as to lie about the fact that Steven's healing powers actually did heal his leg. So yeah, I don't know. It's just trying to look at it from Greg's perspective. I can see why he would have done that, and he really would have sort of laid it on thick to try and spend as much time as he can with Steven. It still is annoying, but because I feel like it's something that was actually intended and like probably part of the actual plot line, or maybe the plot description for this episode, I can't really fault him for that. So that's why I struck that annoyance from the episode. As for, even though I talked about it just now for like 5 minutes, or maybe not that long, I don't know, but my true annoyance with this episode, and something that honestly did take me by surprise, was the fact that animation seemed just like the animation, at least to me, seems like it took a real drop in quality from, like, I would say the past 2 episodes especially, but even several episodes before that, the animation had been really consistent, but the animation in this episode feels like it could have been made back in the first 5 episodes. So, and it was such a drastic change that I kept noticing it in different scenes. Like, I don't know, just like something about Steven seems off. They didn't do a lot of goofy faces, which is usually my typical annoyance with some of the animation, but again, just me, because it's a kid's show. But overall, just the only character I think that didn't really seem affected by this in the episode would have to be Garnet. Everyone else, to some degree, seemed affected, especially Steven, in a strange way. I actually feel like Steven is sort of the litmus test, almost, for me being able to determine what I think of an episode's animation. And I actually went back and just checked on a few episodes from previous, and yeah, his character model, in addition to the animation overall, just really seemed like a drop in quality, which, again, after the last 2 episodes, is really surprising, because it felt like things were really coming to a head, and like the animation was reaching its best point in the series, and then just to drop so drastically. I don't know if this was an episode that maybe was supposed to have maybe taken place earlier in the show, and they had a different way of Greg getting his leg broken. I really don't know. But yeah, just that's like my true annoyance with this episode. The fact that everything, animation and design-wise, just seemed to take a major drop in quality. Did I say drop? I meant drop. But yeah, so those are my favorite parts of this episode and my annoyances. As always, please do let me know if you have any of your own, or if you disagree with any of the ones I just stated. Maybe I'm wrong about the quality drop. I don't think many people will argue that point, but if you actually do disagree with me there, please do let me know, and let me know why. Not just, I think you're wrong, because then you're probably just trolling me. But, okay, moving on from there. I already mentioned the track of the episode. It's the song Dear Old Dad between Steven and Greg. Again, not the best song we've had in this show, but it was still heartwarming, and it helped me make the connection as to why Greg was being so annoying and just why he was sort of grating on my nerves in this episode. But moving on from there, I do have a question that wasn't really answered in this episode because, well, rather than explaining it, my question is, has Steven's healing power actually been affected? Because it obviously works. It heals Greg's leg, but it's still not able to patch the geode. So, well, I guess maybe a full version of the question would be, has Steven's healing power been affected, or was the geode impervious to his healing powers for some reason? That's a question that really does bother me, and I hope gets answered before long, because one, if this actually has somehow affected Steven's healing powers to where they don't work anymore, that could lead to some major issues in the future, especially if any of the other gems get their gems cracked. Or if anyone else gets hurt, like if Steven breaks his leg, it's like he would be able to heal himself, I assume, with his healing spit, but yeah, I don't know. I know I feel like I'm kind of acting like that's an annoyance too, but no, it's a legitimate question that I'm curious about and would really appreciate an answer for. Has this affected his healing powers? And if so, again, maybe to expand on the question there, can Steven's if it has affected his healing powers, can Steven's emotions actually cause his powers to be canceled out? That would be, admittedly, a very interesting direction to go with the series, I think, but it would be worrisome, to say the least, or maybe it would be something where he would have to relearn or find different ways to maybe engage his powers. But yeah, it's like I again, to say for the fourth time, I think, has Steven's powers, or at least his healing powers for now, been affected because of his emotions, because of his self-doubt that was caused by Greg's lie? So yeah, big question there. As for my overall thoughts on this episode, it's admittedly a bit disappointing overall. Again, mainly because of the animation. Definitely needed a bit of levity after the last two episodes, which were definitely, again, the best that I've experienced so far, and also the most dramatic. But yeah, this episode is just really average overall, I would have to say. It does leave me with a huge question that, again, will hopefully be answered at some point, or maybe they'll just be like, oh, it was a fluke, it was just the geode that was having the issues, but it's okay now because duct tape. Maybe I should have made that a favorite part too, duct tape. But yeah. So yeah, it was average overall, not that great of an episode, but I understand why they would go with an episode that is not so serious, not so dramatic, right after the arguably two most dramatic, serious episodes in the show thus far. But yeah, okay, so those are my thoughts on this episode. Again, apologies to anyone that was hoping for a reaction. Sorry to let you down, but I'm kind of glad I didn't bother overall with this episode. But next time, the episode I'm going to be reviewing and possibly reacting to, I'll need to go back and check some of the comments to make sure. But the episode will be Space Race. So we're gonna get to see Steven in space for once, other than when he was on the water ocean tower or whatever it was that Lapis made. But alright, everyone, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Steven Universe. I apologize for being so kind of out there. Haven't taken the ADHD meds today, so I'm a little bit loopy and also a bit tired. But anyway, until next time, everyone, I'm PapaKenn, and I will see you next time for Space Race. Until then, later days.